And over to Ken.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken. I'm an assistant professor in Denmark at Aarhus University. So I'm very grateful that I got invited to give a talk here. And yeah, this is normally I give this talk in front of an academic audience. So I tried to change my framing a little bit, make it a little bit clearer for a different audience. But excuse me if some things were probably made unclear. I've been for around 10 years now working with eye tracking, and you probably know the Apple Vision Pro. It has used this new interaction paradigm where you look at something and you pinch actions, and all these things have a scientific background, and me and my co-authors have worked in a lot of the foundations of that, so I want to give a little bit of an insight of what's been done in the past, and just also other random thoughts I have on what this means for the future of the human-computer interaction. So the big question is, for me, it's always been, and I think it's for a lot of people in this in the world of HCI, extended reality, and input in general, is what would be the next generation paradigm? So we've seen, if we look into the past, we've seen a lot of advances from basic text entry, command line interfaces to the mouse, and some highlights, some maybe even more influential input methods that characterize whole eras of computing out there. If you look back to Mark Weiser and also, yeah, Helge, you mentioned Engelbart. So these things have kind of completely changed accessibility to the digital world, but what you kind of see is it's becoming more spatial, more natural, more direct in a way. So with a mouse, you have still the mouse cursor going around. You move the mouse, you know, oh, okay, you know, this moves that. My hand movement is clearly mapped to that. So it's kind of makes sense more now to have a two-dimensional interface. And then with a touch screen, you just tap something. It's like a hand gesture. You can give direct physical contact. And so what we see now is kind of a slightly different thing, right? The Apple Vision Pro was released this year. Meta glasses were announced, and they are using this slightly different concept, right? So you use your eyes and your hands together. And if you think of consumer devices in the past, there's nothing like that, right? This is the first time that it's out in the world that we have something that is not fully hand-based computing. So yeah, so how did it get there? And yeah, about 10 years ago, started with thinking, not only for virtual reality, but in general, all of these hand-based interfaces, is there any way to get a fundamental advance there beyond a new, beyond just, this is the next input device or something, but is there a new concept that could work across all of these methods, all of these ways of input we have? And of course, our eyes are always involved in the interaction in most of the cases, so we often look at the button before we click it. So that's, yeah, I've kind of looked at a lot of different use cases if you consider like the computer as an input and output model. So at the very left, you see there's the input from the user, some kind of movement that goes into the UI system, and then you will see some kind of output that represents the action of it. And in a UI system or operating system, of course, you have a layer of input devices, interaction techniques, then that interpret what happens, and a lot of other layers. So this is kind of a summary of some of the research I did with eyes and hands. I want to give you a few examples. So it started with working on 2D interfaces. So this is a Microsoft Surface Pro 2015 version. And you can see at the bottom there's an eye tracker attached. And this was one of the first systems where both eye movement and hand movement will track together in one system. And what you can see here is that this interface supports two ways of interaction. The main one is what we're all familiar with. So you can use your right hand and just tap on a button. But you also see this red circle here, which is kind of indicating where the user is looking here. And instead of using the other hand to directly tap, you can also use the same hand. It's just very basic thumb taps to interact with the whole screen. Because you simply look at the item and then you do taps from far away. And this was kind of an intriguing concept for touchscreens, so making kind of gestures, all of them somehow low effort, and I can control everything from a holding hand. And I guess one of the biggest interesting things was that you can combine these two types of interaction, the direct approach and the indirect eye-based approach. And yeah, in my PhD research, I looked at a lot of different instances of that. For example, with a stylus, where normally you, as a designer, you just want to draw in the main area of the canvas. So that's when I'm looking anywhere in the interface, I can just draw normally with my stylus. But if I look up to a menu, the stylus becomes an indirect input control. So normally what I would do, and there's always a lot of menus around, right, in all of these applications. What I would do is I move the pen up, go down for every single change I want to do. And the interesting here is that I can just keep my hand in the center of my attention and just make quick looks up and down to do these secondary actions. And this is interesting that now, if you look at the Apple human interface guidelines, you can see the specific concept of direct and indirect gestures implemented there, because it makes the whole principle of using eye tracking and hand tracking, so it makes it all simpler, right? It's just two types of gestures you can do. But of course, the main part is that it's 3D. So with, in 2017, we extended this to a three-dimensional domain where the basic idea is just that the touch gestures are now replaced with a pinch gesture. So, and you can look at anything you want, and then you can just take any object in. It's a very specific coupling. So the moment you pinch in, that's where the action happens. But this is also something I don't need to explain too much, because it's the same concept as in the Apple Vision Pro now. Yeah, I find it interesting from several perspectives, but mostly compared to how we naturally gesture with our hands with direct interaction. So I just take this, I can intuitively rotate it and bring it into view, I can tap on it. So that's a very easy way to interact. But it also means that my action can only work at one position in space. Right? So my hand has to be there at the same time. So, and the difference to eye and hand based interfaces is that you can now, from any position of your hand, interact with any object you see. So you decouple the direct physical connection. And so one of the last points here, I want to zoom out a bit into considering input devices in general. So direct input device like a touchscreen, it's like a one-step process. Like you just move your hand towards it and you tap, that's it. With a mouse or other input device, even with a controller in VR, it's always like this first you have this cursor movement, and then you can act on do your dragging gesture or whatever you want. And this has implications on the temporal and spatial dimensions of input in a way. So the two-step approach in a sense means it takes a bit more time for every action, but the main benefit of indirect input is that you can work across distance. So it doesn't matter if my element is here or far away, I can just reach it with indirect input devices with a mouse cursor. And then the new category here is the eye-hand approach, because it inherits the distance, independence of interactive devices, but you can still act as fast as a single gesture you do. So that kind of puts it into a new category in this whole space of input devices we had before and potentially in the future.
Can I ask a question? What I keep thinking about as you're showing this is that I'm thinking about even the way we devise websites with the F-shaped website, which is the we supposedly read, top, right, left to right in English or in America. And so we devise our websites to follow this F-shaped pattern. Eventually, it becomes instantiated as the thing we have to do when we make a website. So a lot of how we devise our texts, our environments, are determined by the way we interact with it, right? So I guess my question would be, how will our environments or our interfaces change with this eye-hand interaction, as opposed to what we've been doing all these years with the menu at the top, navigation menu on the right, left-hand side? I mean, it's going to change the way we work with information in the spaces, right? Maybe not?
Well, it's an interesting question, and maybe you've experienced some of it now with the Apple Vision Pro, whether it changed a bit or not. But of course, right now, you see the designs are still very much imported from the 2D world and put into a 3D image. So probably the F shape is still the same, I think.
But can we get away from the 2D world, is what I'm trying to say? Is there going to be a way that we're going to rethink that space so it's not two-dimensional anymore?
Well, it's a bigger question. What does VR mean in 3D and everything? So regarding the eye and hand, I think also my slides kind of finished here. It's just one more. But I guess the interesting thing about eye-based gestures is that you have this physical gap to different objects, and that's kind of eliminated, at least in your perception. Of course, things are still far away, but you can act on them as if they are close. And this provides potentially a new dynamic that might mean new types of interfaces. But it also extends to, the F shape might be there for reading text, but as you also mentioned, if I think of a typical browser, there's menus, there's other things you might want to switch between applications, and all of these things still require some kind of additional UI or segments of the UI.
Have you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have room for one more question while Carl sets up. Any other questions or comments? I can kind of see why there are no questions or comments, because it's such a personal and rich thing, talking about different ways of kind of seeing with our hands and reaching our information. So really food for thought. It's not just following whatever's happening. So,
well, I would say also, so much of how we have developed cognitively has been through our hands, right? And so if we move away from hands and into voice recognition, voice activation, then it's going to change the way we think, right? Essentially, how we think. So those are the kinds of things I think are interesting to ponder, because 5 million years, even though we're not doing the same kinds of gestures, it's still using our hands to a certain degree, right?
That's so cool. And I missed to talk about my last slide, but there was kind of implication. But I think that's especially interesting, that the 5 million years that we are so used to our hands. Imagine now 5 million more years where we know we can use our eyes and hands together. What would that mean? How would that change us potentially? Yeah.
how will it extend our reach, right?
Yeah.
Cognitively. Thank you very much.